All right, it is 6:04 p.m. on Tuesday, August 27th. We'll call the commission meeting to order. This is the August Planning Commission meeting. We'll do roll first, and all members of the commission, as well as our ex officio, are in attendance. We will move from that to the approval of the minutes from our July 23rd, 2024 regular meeting, and I understand there were some adjustments that were requested for those.
Sorry, always do that. For the June meeting, when you got into the description, it referred to this as the May meeting. So she's going to fix it, but it won't print out right now. And the other part was that I had made a comment, but it wasn't clear what the comment was about. The comment was that all of the active duty Navy organizations were accidentally left out of the list of public engagement organizations, and those were going to be added. So that's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Gore. Are there any other changes or updates to last month's minutes? All right, seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our July 23rd, 2024 regular meeting with those changes.
So moved.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. We'll move on to the public comment period. During this time, citizens may comment on subjects of interest not on the agenda or agenda items. To ensure comments are recorded properly, state your name clearly. Individual comments will be limited to 3 minutes to ensure maximum participation during the 15-minute time frame allotted for this item. Public comments may also be submitted online at www.oakharbor.gov/public comment at least 2 business days in advance of an industry board, of this advisory board's meeting. I should also mention before we move on that these meetings are recorded and published to the city's YouTube channel. The city is committed to providing meeting access to the widest possible audience, regardless of technology or ability. If you require accommodation, please call 360-279-4500 at least 2 business days prior to the meeting. Tonight, we will only be displaying those comments that have come in from August 13th to the present. Anything prior to August 13th was shown at the most recent city council meeting that took place on August 13th, and they can be referenced there. So did we have, after we show the written ones, did we have anybody, it doesn't appear we have anybody public to speak tonight? Okay, thank you. Yeah. Thank you to everyone who submitted a comment this evening. At this time, we'll open it up to members of the audience who did not sign up to speak. Do we have anybody this evening? All right, seeing none, we will close the public comment period and we'll move on to the public hearings. During scheduled public hearings, interested parties will be given the opportunity to provide testimony or offer comments as applicable. Please ensure comments are recorded. To ensure comments are recorded properly, state your name clearly. Please limit comments to 3 minutes. This evening, we do not have any public hearings, so we will move on. We will close that section and move on to our discussion, action, and presentation items for this evening. First up is our 2025 major update to the comprehensive plan, and that will be delivered by Mr. Kamak.
Hello there. Good evening, Chair, members of the Commission, Kamak, Principal Planner. I'm going to take a shot at giving you some information on our lands capacity analysis that we're doing as part of our 2025 comprehensive plan update. But before I jump into that, I have a few. I'll try to give a brief history of where we got, how we got here, and what we're doing, because we have some new members in the commission, and we also have the public that probably is interested in this topic. So I'll try to cover some information that's helpful for people who also watch this later on to try and catch up to where we are in our comprehensive plan process. So the city is required to update its comprehensive plan. It's called a major update. It's required by state law to do it every 8 or 10 years. The time period has changed over the last 3 decades, but we're getting around the 8 or 9 year mark for these updates. And these updates, the city is supposed to look at all the legislature that has been passed, and then there are all the new requirements that the state has. And this time we have some new requirements to accommodate housing. So with all these major updates, we have something that we have to do in order to kind of be in par with the rest of the communities in the state, because we are a state, GMA state, growth management state. So we have a lot of requirements that we try to coordinate between us, the other jurisdictions in the state. So it's different from other states where there's no growth management, where there's no coordination. So this is an extra layer that in growth management states, the cities and counties and the state has to do. So the Growth Management Act was adopted in 1991, and the city, as we know it today, with its city limits, and in 1991, when the GMA was adopted, there was a UGA line that was drawn. At that time, it was the first comprehensive plan. The state did not have much guidelines in terms of where you draw this UGA line. All you had to do was submit a comp plan with the city limits and what you think is the growth boundary for your city. And that's what was submitted in 1991. Until today, those boundaries are the same. So that's almost 30 years, and we're still with the same boundaries, and all these 30 years worth of population has been mostly accommodated within the city. We've done updates in 2005, 2016, now we're doing another update. And all these updates were not easy. They were all challenging. They had different challenges, and the city has learned a lot from all of these updates, and we continue to learn, and the state is also continuing to learn as we move forward. So all of these requirements that we get with each of these updates, we're just further fine-tuning as a state, as a city, and as a county in terms of how best as a region we accommodate the population growth without sacrificing the resources that we all moved here for, whether it's the water in the Puget Sound, or whether it's the trees and the green space. So GMA is supposed to try and protect that and direct growth in the most reasonable fashion. And all cities and counties have spent the last 30 years making an effort to do so, and we are doing that as we speak with this update. And again, these requirements and these solutions are not meant to be a solve-all type. This is just what we deal with on an ongoing basis with changing circumstances. So things change every 5-10 years, and we adapt as best as we can with the guidance that we're given from the state and from the local knowledge that we have. So that's kind of a gist in terms of comp plan itself and where we are in the overall comp plan process. So we're in the 3rd or 4th major update since the comprehensive plan was adopted. So we have hired for this update, because of all the housing targets and a lot of the legislation that has been pushed from the state to the counties and the cities, we've hired consultants. The state also has provided money. We're doing all of this with grant programs. So the state has required certain things from the cities, and they're also providing the funding so that the cities can hire help to do the work. And that's what we've done. We've hired our consultants to help us with all these requirements, mainly the housing targets, the land capacity analysis, which we're going to cover tonight. But they're also helping with the climate element. They're also helping with the update of the overall comp plan, which we're yet to see. We're yet to see all of that come, the big plan where we have to make sure that all our policies are in line with the state-adopted legislation. So all of that will be coming in the next 2 or 3 months. But currently, we're just going to dive into the housing capacity analysis and the housing targets, because that's one of the biggest issues that this comprehensive plan update is going to try and tackle. We knew that this would be a difficult, it's a technical topic. There's as much science as there's art to this, and we'll kind of chat through some of that stuff. And see, we're trying to do all of this, within the guidelines and within the tools that we have currently. And so we've hired Kimley Horn as our consultant, and they are looking at all our documents. They've looked at our documents. They've done many reviews, and I'll share some of the so this presentation that I'm going to share with you is a presentation that the consultant has done in order to give a presentation to the City Council tomorrow. They were not here today, so it's an opportunity for me to try and show the slides, share the numbers, but it's an opportunity for me to give this information that I'm giving to you right now, a little bit of history and a little bit of context before we jump in to the main thing. So I'm going to go over the slides. These slides are addressed to the City Council. Because of time, or the lack thereof, in terms of coordinating the packet, the City Council meeting is tomorrow. So the packets have been compiled, so you guys are reviewing the same material basically that the City Council is going to see tomorrow. So I'll jump in to the presentation, and whenever I can, I will kind of deviate a little bit to provide some side comment and some context to some of these numbers so that we better understand where we're coming from and what are some of the challenges that we're facing. So basically, the presentation for council and planning commission is to try and just give the project overview, talk about some of the tasks and schedule, and then start talking about the housing targets. That's the main topic. And there is a joint meeting at least there was a joint meeting, is still being planned for the September 10th between the City Council of Oak Harbor and the commissioners of Island County, and they already had a meeting, and they kind of have a sort of an understanding of the challenge that we're taking on with these housing targets. There's an understanding of how much Island County is having to accommodate, and how much of that is Oak Harbor having to accommodate. So we have some 8,000 units or so that Island County has to accommodate, and we're, as Oak Harbor, as a city, accommodating at least 5,300 to 5,500 units of that 8,000. So these have been sort of kind of touched on a little bit at the last meeting, and the September 10th meeting is a follow-up. And so all of this information we're trying to provide and support our commission and council members as they go into these joint meetings with the commissioners, so that they can talk about these terms with an understanding of what it is that we're working with. This is just an overview. I shared a couple documents with the Planning Commission, just the project charter. These are all just consultant documents in terms of how we're going to move through the process. We've also created a community engagement plan, and if you're already not aware, there is a survey already out on the comprehensive plan. This is the first survey. This is on our website. If you go to the city's website, it's on one of the banners, and you can click on it. It's just 12 questions or 13 questions. Won't take long. It's very high level. We are hoping to have a second survey, however, which could potentially dive into a little more detail, and we haven't gotten that far yet. But anyway, we have a community engagement plan. It captures all of, the process by which we're going to engage the community. And we're also updating our critical area regulations and doing our climate change element. And our schedule currently is to have all of this work completed by December. Originally, June was the timeline, and we're still trying to shoot for June to try and have the majority of our work done. However, we know that the county is going to adopt theirs only in December. And it is wise for us to adopt our comp plan after the county has adopted theirs, because the UGA lines and the maps and so on are the counties to actually draw and adopt. And only after they adopt do they become ours as well. And so it doesn't make sense for us to adopt a comprehensive plan ahead of them and maybe have a different map than theirs. And that's what happened in 2005, 2006. There was inconsistencies between the city and the county, and that led to a lot of confusion for many years between staff and the council members and commission. And it was also the time when we had the downturn in the economy, so it was not really a very good time, and we want to learn from those lessons, and we have. So what are some of the major changes that we'll be considering in this update? I think I mentioned the climate element. That's a new element that will be added to our comprehensive plan, so our consultants are helping with that. The state has some processes and some tools to use, and so they'll be using that in order to update that. And then we have legislation on middle housing. This is something that our senior planner Ray Lindenberg is working on. There's been some discussions at the Planning Commission on this, and there'll be more discussions as we get into the comp plan process. So this is just a legislative update. And then the housing element update, and that is what mainly is the focus, is the capacity. Do we have housing, and do we have housing for the right incomes? That's the main thing that the state has asked all the communities and the counties to do. So just a quick kind of view of the project schedule. We are, you can see community engagement will go on till the beginning of next year, maybe even a little further. We will have an OPAC, we call it an OPAC, the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. They'll have their first meeting September 19th, I think is the date. There are a couple planning commissioners on there. We'll be sending out emails either this week or next week to try and get people the information on these meetings and get them scheduled. Of course, we have all the legislative meetings with the Planning Commission and the City Council throughout the process. The plan audit, the land capacity analysis, that's what we're looking at right now. The plan audit is still continuing. We haven't gotten any submittals on that from the consultants, but I'm thinking that the next set of steps is going to deal with the plan that's not dealing with necessarily only the housing. And then, towards the end of the year and the beginning of next year, we'll start looking at the draft plan and some language. So we got to kind of we have a lot of different layers of these comp plan processes working simultaneously. So from here onwards, we'll be giving you a lot of information. We'll try. Our intent is to share documents with you as soon as possible. We're getting so many documents, we don't want to hold on to them too long. Otherwise, the packet will get bigger and bigger if we delay it getting to you. So we're going to try and get you the documents that we get as soon as possible. We'll work through them. All of them will be drafts before we finalize it. And as we get more towards the end of the process, we'll be coming to you for more final drafts. This is what we want you to recommend that we send to the county, or this is what we want you to do to send to the state. And so we'll start to finalize. But till then, most of these are drafts, and we have to start the conversation somewhere. So we want to release these drafts to get people to talk about it, so that we kind of know what the community feels about this. And if we're getting a lot of feedback, we'll get a lot of information. We as staff have spent a lot of time looking at these documents, but we're technical. We look at it in certain perspectives. We want to know what the public sees. There are things that people see that we don't see. We want to be able to take feedback, make sure that we have all the right perspectives moving forward. So housing targets. So before I jump in, this is all where the fun is and all the numbers that were in front of you. So I want to kind of provide a context in terms of how we go about doing this, what are the challenges. In summary, we'll go over some of these tables. The county allocated a certain number of housing. What we are supposed to do with it is we are supposed to try and see if we can accommodate that with our existing tools. So first you do a lands capacity analysis, which means you try to look in the city as is currently, and you look at all the existing zoning, all the existing densities, and you do a calculation based on just our existing tools. What if all the vacant land you see in Oak Harbor, what if they got developed based on our existing tools? How much housing would we get? That's kind of what the basic first step is, and that's what the land capacity analysis is, and that's one of the documents that is attached to your report. So that one will talk only about the existing conditions. This is our existing zoning, this is our existing density, and this is the availability based on the countywide planning policies. So the Planning Commission and the City Council, not too long ago, about 6 to 8 months ago, adopted countywide planning policies which describe the process by which we need to do this. So it describes the assumptions, it describes the exceptions. So will all the single-family homes develop in the next 20 years? No, we don't think so. There's a certain percentage of them that will redevelop into 2 units or maybe more based on their size, but not all of them will. So all these assumptions are in the countywide planning policies, and we've used that process to come up with that existing land capacity analysis. It uses existing zoning, existing process that we agree with the county, so there's no surprises. This is not something that we have cooked up. This is all based on agreed templates. So the first step is the land capacity analysis. Then the state asks you to say, okay, if you did the land capacity analysis and if there was capacity for all the housing, then no problem. Everything can be accommodated in the city and we move forward, no problem. What if there's not enough capacity? Then what is it that you're supposed to do? And the state has processes for that. It says you have to consider development regulations and so on, see if you can make some adjustments. So our consultants have done that, and I think that's what's called the housing needs analysis, where they consider options. So what's our need? Here's a capacity, but we have a need. And then we're supposed to look at these options. And I'll go over all of these. I'm just kind of giving you an overall. So you look at options and development codes, and then you have to rerun your analysis based on some of these new codes. If you created these new codes, if you created these new densities, then how much more can you accommodate? And so the consultants have done that work as well. And then they've also provided a third option where you can talk about not only development codes that you change, but you can actually look at properties where you can actually get some capacity. And I'll get to that a little bit. It's really tricky. You cannot get capacity in any lot. So if there's a lot in the central business district that's vacant today, it's already calculated in the capacity. So you don't want to create a district over that, right? So you try and look for land that is under-zoned. So if it's a zoned R1 for low density, and if we can bring it to R4, we've gained capacity there. If we went from R4 to CBD, those two districts are the same residential densities, pretty much. So we're not gaining much, right? So it's really tricky, even in lands that we want to identify to change. We want to try and find the lands that have the most capacity. Just changing everything to a high capacity zone doesn't mean that you'll get the capacity. And even past that, when you get this, it has to be per the AMI, the 0 to 30, the different income brackets. So the state has said, not only do you have to have capacity, you have to have capacity for the income brackets, right? Your low-income housing has to have some units, and your higher income will have certain units. And then the consultants have looked at that to say, okay, what kind of units can support your low-income people? What is the density? What is other cities? What does existing data show? And we know that R4 or really the really high density districts are the ones that can take the 0 to 30 and the 30 to 50 AMI. So we need that type of development. So Even if we have capacity in our single family, even if we added one extra home to every single family home, yes, we got an additional maybe 3,000 or 4,000 units. However, it's in the wrong AMI. It's in the wrong, we have plenty of that capacity. We need it for the 0 to 30 and 30 to 50, and we cannot get it in our single family zones. So that whole group is out for trying to come up with housing for that. So these are some of the challenges that lie in the details of how we're doing this and what the state has given us. So having said that, I hope that is kind of like an overall 30,000 foot level type of explanation. So I'm going to jump into the presentation and we'll go into some of the numbers so that you can see what the numbers in your report have shown coordinate with what I'm talking about. So if you remember this table was in the countywide planning policies, and this is the table that assigns the housing for each of the jurisdictions in Island County. So this is out of the countywide planning policies. County was given about 8,700 units by the state to accommodate in Island County, and you can see the distribution here. 55, 33 units have been assigned to Oak Harbor. It also gives the breakdown of each of these income brackets. So non-PSH is public supported housing. So 0 to 30, how many units we need. 30 to 50 AMI, how many we need. So if you're wondering what Oak Harbor's average median income is, it is somewhere on this, it is 102,000. If it's not on here, it's in one of the documents. It's about 102,000 is what the Oak Harbor's AMI is. And so this is the table adopted in the county-wide planning policies, and these are the numbers we're trying to accommodate. The highlighted numbers are the most challenging, as I mentioned, the public supported housing 30 to 50 and 50 to 80. This is the land use that is most difficult to find in Oak Harbor currently with our existing zoning. And we'll get into that a little more. So what are some of the high-level challenges? I probably touched on some of this already. Shifting significant growth to the city, 5,000 units, that's a large number. Everybody understands that. We understand that. So that is a challenge. The second challenge, as I mentioned, is providing housing in those income brackets. It's not that Oak Harbor doesn't have capacity. It's providing it in those income brackets that makes it challenging. How we still have to have a conversation with the county in terms of how growth is accommodated in the UGA. That is still a big mystery. We are yet to cross those hurdles, and that conversation has not started, and it won't start till we finish this. So we have to know how much housing we can accommodate in the city limits before we can go and talk to the county to find out how much they can accommodate just outside our city limits, right? And that's a different conversation. There's a lot of challenges there. So, but what we can do is we can only calculate the capacity for the city because that's what we have the tools for. We have our zoning, we know the density, and we can only do that. We cannot go and apply that density in the county. It's not our land to do so. It's not our jurisdiction to do so. So how, and approaching, and of course the challenge of how do we split that? How do we come to an understanding of what can be accommodated in the city and then what should be accommodated in the UGA? So these are all the big challenges. So this is again, a closer look at, that table and, how much our existing units, this is all our existing counts according to the state, and this is all our units that we need to accommodate for our next 20 years. And we need to specifically show, as per state law, where some of these units are going to be. So it's very location specific. We can't generally say we have capacity and we have X number of units. We have to kind of specifically show these regions where they'll actually develop. So what are our findings so far? So I've kind of explained, what we had to do step by step. We followed the countywide planning policies. So out of the 5,533 dwelling units, we originally, when we did the land capacity analysis, we have a capacity for 2,474 units. which leaves a surplus of 3,059 units. That was the original finding from our land's capacity analysis. That's using existing, conditions and existing zoning. The county not only allocates housing, they also allocate jobs. So these are the numbers that we use to find out about commercial and industrial land uses. Do we have enough industrial? Do we have enough commercial? And so the county assigned about 1,200 or so jobs to the city. We actually have, according to the calculations, a capacity for 1,770. So from a job allocation point, our capacity analysis shows that we have actually enough commercial and industrial to accommodate the growth. And so what is the capacity of people that these dwelling units accommodate? And that's what the consultant has shown. We can accommodate 5,747 people, and the number of people are still deficit is 7,920 as of just by doing our land capacity analysis. So we are, as you can see, the numbers are pretty high in terms of where we're missing the 0 to 80, and we're also missing is that the 80 to 120? I can't see from here, but we're also deficit in that bracket as well. So these are the challenges that we have. So this is a breakdown of so in order to determine where these capacity lies in the city, right? I mean, I was saying you can't have capacity in your R1 for your lower in AMI folks because it's just land values don't add up. So what we have to determine, what are the zones that allow for such housing to take place? So for example, the 0 to 300,000 AMI, those kind of units can be accommodated in the R4 and the CBD zones. So we have these uses, we have a list table in terms of, we say where multifamily is permitted, where duplexes are permitted, where commercial is permitted, where, we have all of these zones where we list them. So the consultants have gone in, found out in which zoning categories can we possibly accommodate structures that will accommodate these income brackets. And they have found, what is the need and what is the existing capacity and how much do we have either in surplus or deficit. And of course, as you can see, we're highlighting that in the lower income bracket, we definitely have a big deficit, more than 2,000 unit deficit that we're trying to plan for. So as I talked about, what is our next steps once we find out that we don't have capacity? And I think I went over this. We have some options. We do development regulations, and we looked at areas. And I'll jump into that a little bit because that's kind of how do we address this gap is by looking at some of these options in terms of zoning. And then eventually we have to communicate with the county in terms of whatever we cannot reasonably accommodate within the city with our existing tools. And I'll get to it again. There is capacity in the city for housing. Again, to get it in the brackets that we need it is challenging, but generally there's capacity. It's just that the lower income housing is much difficult to find room for, a place for, with the current zoning. So what are some of the others? I talked about three options. So this is the consultants are providing these as options. So we do a land capacity analysis. We're required to do so by the state, and we've done that, and we found out that we are short 3,000 dwelling units and 7,900. So that's one option. So in a way, we've done our land capacity analysis, and we can say we don't have any other options, and I don't think this is a viable option. We'll go into the pros and cons of all these options, but this is something that we have to do basically, but we do have to do more, is what I'm saying. So it won't be acceptable if we stop there and said, we just don't have, this is it, and we're not going to make any changes. We were comfortable with our development regulations. Sorry, county, sorry, state. We're going to stay as is. I don't think we have that option, but anyway, we're considering that. So option 2 is to consider development changes, and some of the changes, and I'll list some of the changes we're considering. One of the big changes we can do is density, increase the density. I think our maximum density currently is about 22 units per acre, and I think the consultants looked at upping that to 38 units per acre. And that's a significant jump in our high-density district. The CBD district doesn't have a limit in terms of how many units you can put there, but there are height limits and things like that. So the development regulations is also suggesting if we're going to increase density, you might also want to consider height regulation changes in order to accommodate that higher density. So these are some of the regulations that are going to be suggested. That will be option 2, and I'll go over them a little bit. Again, with option 2, we can increase our capacity a little bit, and we reduce the shortfall to 2,400 units from 3,000 units by doing these development regulation changes. And then there's option 3, which is option 2, development regulation changes, plus some rezoning of property. And the consultants have identified those properties as well, and I'll go over that a little bit. And that provides another up in capacity, but not the full capacity, not the 5,000. So we've gone from, we've added about 1,000 units. So from our base land capacity analysis, we have added 1,000 units by considering development regulation changes and potentially some upzoning. So it's, that's a lot to accommodate. I mean, in the past, when housing targets were not your requirement for growth related, it was just population. So the county would allocate a certain amount of population to the city, and that's all you had to deal with. And you accommodated the population, and you did your land's capacity analysis based on population, and you said, yes, we can accommodate this population. We don't need to grow. Now with these housing targets, it's housing related things that we have to plan for, and so these are getting different. So the criteria and our framework is getting a little more rigid in terms of how we calculate, how we expand our boundaries, if any, or how do we accommodate housing within the city. So this is kind of the basic approach that the state is recommending all cities do. So we're doing the same thing, and it makes sense. We try and adjust our development regulations, and we do what we can to take as much of the population as we can in the city. So again, this lists the pros and cons of your option 1. Again, this is the quickest and easiest. However, this is probably the hardest to sell to the county because then they would have to plan for the 3,000 or so units in the UGA, and so we'll be in kind of a gridlock without going much if we just choose option 1. Option 2, again, is with the increase in density, increase in height, and therefore we definitely increase the capacity over option 1. But the fact that we can do more in option 3 makes this an option that, is you can go with this option. This is, if we stop here, we meet GMA requirements, really. I mean, because we're doing our development regulation changes and we're doing as best as we can to accommodate it. Option 3 is we're going one step further. We're going and we're saying, okay, we're going to even change some zoning of properties to see if we can accommodate even more. So we're taking even that third step to accommodate as many as we can. So we're doing what we can in the city to accommodate as much of this allocation as possible. And so option 3, again, I went over this a little bit, pros and cons. None of these options preclude us from continuing to plan for increased density. And this is the time where I should maybe say this. So I said we have to come up with capacity with the existing tools, and it has to be the 20-year capacity. So if we change, if we do by the end of this plan, we should be able to adapt development regulations and change the zoning, and therefore show that we have the 20-year capacity now. You know what I mean? We cannot say, oh, we'll get another 5,000 units over the next 5 years by doing this over the next 5 years, so we're going to plan for a special area and we're going to do this. Any future idea is a future capacity. It cannot be considered in today's capacity. So if somebody has an idea of saying, oh, let's increase the density of all the lots between Highway 20 and Midway Boulevard and downtown. This is the CDA area that a lot of people are talking about. It's in the planning stages. There's great ideas for accommodating a lot of housing. However, these are just ideas. They are not current tools. They do not give us the current capacity. We cannot say, oh, we will make a plan in 2 years to provide this many more housing. That is a future capacity. When you do that plan and you do have that capacity, in your next capacity analysis, you can accommodate it. But for today, we cannot accommodate all our future capacities. So all our future ideas are future capacities, not our current capacity. So this is a very important point because everybody has ideas on what we can do to build in the city. So even the consultant said, we can show 10-story buildings in downtown and say, oh, we could take all the units. It's not practical, and we don't have the tools to do that. Today's zoning tools doesn't allow for us to do it. So how can we say we got that capacity? It's a future idea. It's a future capacity. It'll come the next year. We have to work with what we have currently, and that's the only talking tool we have with the state and the county. So anything that we go beyond using our existing tools and methodology is a speculation, is future things, is future ideas. They're great ideas, and I don't want to stop any of them. They can happen, but they're all going to come as future capacity because we're dealing with a limited time. We're supposed to do this analysis now. We're supposed to do this analysis before 2025. We're supposed to make these decisions with the current tools to show this work and this density and this capacity, and not rely on the next 50 years or 70 years to come up with it. So that's a restriction that we have from the state. Otherwise, everybody would claim, oh yeah, sure, we can adjust, we can take out our ceilings on our density, we can take out our ceilings on our height, and we can accommodate all the development just within the city. It's not realistic, and we don't have the tools to do it, so we can't do it at this time. So I think we have to be, we kind of have to look at this. That's the technical aspect of it. The art part of it is all these ideas that we want to accommodate all these higher densities, but the technical aspect of it is we have limited resources and limited times and limited tools at this time. So we're working with the zoning tool that we have right now, and I want to make this, some of the commissioners were here when our planner Nolan went over the form-based code. I think it was a couple meetings ago. Form-based code is another tool we use for zoning, right? And it's a way, we want to move towards it, but that tool is not available for us right now, okay? We want to move towards it. We're going from a Euclidean zoning, which segregates uses. This is a 100-year kind of an experiment. It started in New York, where they didn't have any separation of uses. There was health impacts. And then the zoning came where they decided to separate all the residential from the commercial and the industrial, and that's how zoning was born. It was tested in the courts, and then it became a tool that the cities could use. And so you separated all your single family, your multifamily, and all of that over the span of years has allowed for the cities to grow as they are right now. However, we're finding out the Euclidean zoning is not great for the environment. You're creating more transportation issues, maybe not a great carbon footprint. And so mixing of uses is starting to become more of a topic throughout the country. How do you mix uses with the existing tools, which is intending to separate it? So we're slowly starting to take these zoning tools and starting to mix uses. So we're slowly breaking down this Euclidean zoning tool that we've used for 100 years, and we're going to go towards another tool. But we still have to use this tool. With zoning will still be existent even if we go to form-based code, it'll be limited in a limited way, but it changes capacity in different ways. So we on a transition period, I would say, with all these updates, we're moving in a direction of change. And so some of these tools will change, but however, for the current time and for our current purpose, we have to use the tools that we have and we have to use the resources that we have. And therefore, this analysis that's done is with that light in mind. And so I'm not trying to preclude any of the ideas that we have as a city in terms of development or development potential in downtown, marina, CDA. All of this is great and none of that has to stop. However, some of what we envision through those planning processes are going to come to us in future capacity, and it cannot be counted as this round of capacity because it's not existent. It's not even in a plan form. It's not in an adaptive plan form. So that's the main difference. We're kind of limiting, or we have to work with what we have right now. So that being said, this is the, now this map was not in the housing needs analysis that was sent out to the commission. I'm glad the presentation went out. This map is in that presentation portion of it. So these are the lots that criteria-based were identified as areas for zoning. Mainly, they're either R1 lots or C3 lots. And converting them to zoning that can accommodate housing will get us the most capacity. And these have been kind of criteria-based and located based on services, in the sense that they are either along a transit route of some sorts, or they are in the center of town, easily convertible, has infrastructure, etc. So this is just a starting point. This is, again, like I said, a way to get us started, to start having this conversation internally amongst us, and to also start the conversation with the county. So the gist of it is that through our analysis, through our lands capacity analysis, and through some options of trying to increase our density and development capacity, the end kind of finding is that we don't have the necessary capacity or the necessary tools to accommodate all of what the county has allocated. I think that's what we're getting at, that there is only a certain amount we can, we're doing our best, and there is a certain number that the county has to accommodate in their UGA. And how they accommodate it in the UGA is still a conversation we need to have. We don't know for sure how that's going to go, but that's another conversation for another meeting. We can talk about how that can happen when we have a little more information and when we talk to the county about it. But this is kind of where things are right now, and wanted to share this information with the commission and get your thoughts, questions, and concerns, or anything that you may have that I can clarify for you if something is not clear. This is the time to bring it up, and I will do my best to answer any questions or comments.
Thank you, CAC. Any questions from the commission? Yes, Vice Chair Engelbert. Commissioner Fry.
CAC, thanks. I really appreciate you kind of dumbing this down for me. I have multiple questions. First off, I'll just thank you again for dumbing it down for me, because that really helps me understand so I can ask some more possible questions here. So with the existing tools that you have that we can't change at this point because it's not part of our current land use, LC
Capacity
currently,
analysis.
the tools. Why do we need to look at an option 2 and 3? Because neither of those options are part of our current tools either. Because we're already set at our current zoning. So how would changing that be an effect, and how would that be an additional tool to you since it's not part of the current tools?
Yeah, I'm using zoning itself as a tool. Within zoning, there are many tools. So the option 2 is tweaking some of the tools within the zoning ordinance. So within the zoning ordinance, you have height limitations, you have density, number of units per acre, and all of that. So we're using zoning as a tool, and we're going to use it for some time before we change to anything else. And even when we go to a form-based code, we'll still have underlying zoning. The option 2 is the tools within zoning. So within zoning is all your development regulations for private property. So setbacks, how much of your lot you can cover, how high you can go, what are the requirements, street frontages. All of this is contained in the zoning and the subdivision ordinance. And in that zoning tool, currently our height for single family is 35 feet. So that's a tool, but now we can adjust that tool. We can take 35 to 55, and that's what option 2 is doing, is those tools within zoning is being changed to accommodate more height and also accommodate more units. So that's our option 2.
Okay, that was a perfect explanation. Thank you. To a side question to that is, if we change the zoning laws, I'm only going to use this particular area as a location, but let's use over by Walmart. Let's say that the folks that are building there now and have just bought a home that had the view of the harbor, and let's say they paid $1.5 million for their house because of that view, and now we put property in front of it, let's say, I'm not saying that's the case here, but using it as an example, and we build houses in front of that now 55 feet tall where they were limited at 35 and they just lost that view. We just reduced the effect of how much the value of their property is. How do we pay them back for that they lost because of us rezoning that?
I would request a change of perspective on that. So buying a house with a view is not a city incentive. It's a private incentive. It's a development incentive. And these are things that you make a choice as a private property owner. And these are things that you can only assume is protected, but is not. Views are not protected necessarily. Just because you paid for a view today, and if your neighbor comes and builds a house, you cannot tell your neighbor, sorry, I paid extra for the view, you can't build to zoning regulations. So if somebody sold you a house with a view saying that it's going to be here for all the time that you live, then that's a false information, unless the
No,
view is protected.
I got that, but my
Okay.
question is you go and buy a house and you spend $1.5 million on it. You spent that much money because of that view. Now the city, I say the city because it's us, has gone and changed the code now. They lose that view and they go to sell that house. They're not going to give $1.5 million for that house. So they have lost their value. How do we make up that difference?
I would say that the city is not responsible for that view unless it's protected. Now, so we have in our plans, we have view corridors, okay? So as a public entity, we can provide resources to protecting only what's in the plan as public. The city is not tasked with protecting all the views for all the homes. Now, we have our zoning regulations and height regulations to try and give everybody an advantage. You stagger your height, 35 for single family, 45 for multifamily, and get higher for your commercial mixed uses, with the idea that you're providing options wherever they are to maximize that. But it doesn't mean you have to protect it as a city. You're not entitled to protect everybody's view from a city standpoint. The city does have the option to change these heights, and these are the tools that the city has. A person buying into a view home should understand the city's capabilities or shortfalls. If the city can't meet an individual's expectation on what's protected, unless it's publicly protected. Now, if there was a plan that says all these views need to be protected, then yes, we won't even, first of all, increase the height without changing the plan first. So we have to go to the plan first and say, we have a protected view here. If we increase the height, we're going to lose this. As a community, do you want to decide what you want to do? You want to take away the view and give the height? Or do you want to take away the height and keep the view? If there's no view protection, It's not the city's to protect, it's not the public domain to protect. So it's the person's value to lose, it's not the city's responsibility that the value got lost. They paid additional for their choice. It's not a protected right. The view is not a protected right.
Ooh, I'm glad I don't own any waterfront property with a view, man. But, boy, I tell you, there's gonna be some really upset people if
So
that's the case.
people that used to live before this hillside development, there was only trees. The people who lived on top didn't have a view. There were trees blocking that. Once the trees came down, now they have a view. Now, what do you say about that? That's nothing to do with the city. So the value gained in these instances are based on different actions that the city does not control. So you have to understand that there's no value taken. The city does not owe anybody that unless it's a protected view.
Okay. Well, I learned something new about homeownership tonight. Thank you. If we don't have land capacity currently, right? Because that's what I understood from the brief. You made the comment that we don't have the option to say no. But do we have the option? If currently today, under the current tools, we don't have the land capacity to meet what the county has asked us to do, then wouldn't it fall back to the county to have to make those decisions? Because if we don't meet it currently, I see us being able to tweak some things, right, and trying to help out. But at the same token, me as not just sitting on this planning commission, but me as a homeowner, I'm all about growth, and I understand we're planning, trying to make the growth better for the community with better transportation routes, better transportation, et cetera. But if we don't have the growth right now, why can't we tell the county no right now and let's let the county absorb some of it? I don't know how they'll do that. That's not my concern at this point. And to also lead into that, there are a couple of things that I'm wondering, that I'm curious about. If we grow with these additional, I mean, that's a huge increase. 5,500 homes is not, and the amount of population. I understand it's projected, but right now our infrastructure currently is struggling to keep up with what our current population is, i.e. Highway 20, Whidbey, some of the side arterial roads that we call arterial roads. They're staying busy. We can't keep up with the current infrastructure, maintaining it currently, and we're going to increase this much. I don't see how we can meet that until we meet other requirements as well, such as maintaining our current infrastructure. And along with that, I'm going to say this. All my Navy career, every time I would come home from deployment, I would step off that plane from foreign countries, from the ship, from even local. And the minute you step off that plane at NES Whidbey Island, the first thing that I always, and I can still smell it today, is the fresh, clean air. My concern with this growth is we got to take down more trees to grow. It's maybe not as much as what I'm thinking, because we have land capacity in town already. But my concern is we're going to lose that fresh air because these trees filter the carbons in the air and provide oxygen for us to breathe. And I'm not, somebody might get upset, and I apologize, but this is the Oklahoman in me. I'm not a tree hugger, but I love trees, okay? And I know if we need to take them down to do something, that's fine. But I'm begging that we please make sure that we maintain what Oak Harbor is known for, and this island that has kept me here for over 35 years is this crisp, clean air. And cutting down more and more of these trees is not going to keep us that way. And increasing the population and the housing is going to create more carbon. So the fresh air that we currently breathe today, we might not have in the future if we don't protect it now. So if we don't currently have the land, and I know this is kind of on a side topic, but it still mixes in with this because of the, I forget what you called it, the state come out with the,
Growth management?
yeah, the growth management, but it had something to do with the environmental piece of it,
Climate
the
change.
climate piece.
Yeah,
Along with that, and I know I'm adding a lot, CAC, and I'm not beating you up. I know you're doing the best you can, and I really appreciate this. And I'm thankful that you're answering some of these questions because the public's going to want to know these answers, and you're better to explain it than I am. But also, currently, PSE, and I don't know how many of y'all have been a part of this, but they've got us where at certain times they do this peak hour thing, because they sent me a letter that said that we're currently at capacity. We're currently at capacity for PSE. If we're currently at capacity, and I know they want to go to electric vehicles, that saves carbon, right? Kind of helps back on the tree thing. But if we're at max capacity already, and we add this many homes, that's going to be a huge impact on the electrical grid for the island as well. Have we looked into that aspect of it too, or is that something at a later date when we actually look at where we're building and what we're building?
so you had several questions in there, and I'll try to answer as best as I can. So one of the questions was like, why don't we tell the county no, that we can't take it? In some sort of way, we are saying that, in the sense, because the county has allocated 5,500 to the city and its UGA. So we're saying we can take only this much in the city. So in a way, we're saying there are things that the county will have to do in order to accommodate in the UGA. So this document is in a way of saying we can't take the 5,500 units in the city. That's kind of what this whole process is telling us, that we cannot accommodate that. So in a way, we're saying no to the county. We cannot, but we're not saying no, go away. We're saying we want to work with you and see how we can accommodate it. But with our current zoning and with our current tools, this is all we can take for right now. We can't, anything more would be just speculative and arbitrary and not practical. So in a way, we're telling them that with these documents, and starting the next step in the conversation about how to do that in the county. And when we say in the county, I'm not talking about, now the county has allocations that they have to deal with in the general, they have their LAMRIDs, they have other areas where they have development, and they have taken on like 1,900 units or so that they're trying to accommodate. But what they should accommodate in the UGA is also county, right? I mean, city's UGA is also county. They have to do that as well. So in a way, we're asking them to accommodate in the county, not in the general county, but within the city's UGA. And that's where the next step of conversation, they're going to come back, and we don't have a map of our city, but if you look at our UGA, about 70% of it is developed. There's already homes on 70% of the city's UGA. So we have very little land left. And so when they look at that land and go, how are we going to accommodate 2,000 units, they have to come up with solutions as well. And that's when they have to start talking to us in terms of what can we do? How can we get more land into the city? We have to get land into the city to annex in order to develop at that density. You don't want to develop at that density in the county because they don't have services. So all of these need to happen. So in a way, to answer your first question, yes, we are using these documents to have that conversation in a nice way. We are telling the county we're doing as best to take in as much as we can, but we can't take it all. That's what we're telling the county with these documents. The second question was on, I think, the trees and the fresh air and so on. And so I'm glad we're doing the climate resiliency element, so that we'll talk about that as well. It's good to talk about. I'm glad that the state has that element as a requirement in the update, because for all the impacts we're going to create with growth and development. We also have to address the climate resiliency, and so we're developing policies to try and manage that. And so, over periods of updates, we'll have more requirements in that as well. So in that way, you're building up this model, so to speak, to try and solve problems in a systematic way. In the process, we learn some things will work and some things don't work, but at least we're doing it as a state, doing it as a region. So Oak Harbor is not the only one that has PSC problems. I got that call in Mount Vernon as well. So they're doing it for the entire region. So all of the cities have the capacity issues, and PSC is supposed to, as a utility or as a public utility, they will have to deal with the development. They'll get all of these updates from all the cities and counties, and they will know about the UGA expansions. They'll have to plan for infrastructure expansions. The state will probably has already given them the 20-year projections in terms of how many populations. So they are also tasked with doing some of these planning efforts so that they can increase their capacity as well. So being in a growth management state, it gives them an option to address those as well. So.
Okay, thanks again. I really don't like putting you in the seat like that.
Oh,
but
no, that's it.
I really appreciate what you do and for explaining it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Wilson?
CAC, I apologize. Just wanted to get on Eddie's question there. Do we have something, either from the county that we've done as a city ourselves or from the state, requirements for, out of a lack of a better term, green acreage, as far as density for the city, where for every 5 acres of development, we have 1 acre requirement of just green area, or do we have anything like that?
That's in our zoning. So we have, our zoning ordinance has all of those requirements. So when a developer comes in, let's say with 10 acres of they have 10 acres and they want to develop, they have to follow our zoning and subdivision codes. And our zoning and subdivision codes has minimum lot size, has stormwater requirements, has right-of-way requirements, has buffer requirements, and all of that. So in designing a development, and by following these requirements, they will be providing all the space. So if you see a development that was done 20 years ago and a development that's done 2 years ago, you can see the change in the densities, right? And before there was more open space requirements, there was less lot coverage. Now there's more lot coverage, more house on a lot. All of these are changes that we have done in the last 5-10 years to accommodate density. That's why Oak Harbor hasn't grown. If we were grown with the same lot size that we were making in the 1970s and 80s, we would have extended all the way to the other side. We made lots smaller. We made units more denser, more units in a particular acre with our development regulations. So you can see the difference between those developments. There is, however, the open space requirements on all of that are baked into the zoning regulations. In the sense, the first zoning regulation came about because of air and light. So in New York, the zoning regulations, they were building buildings right next to each other, like the windows were being blocked by the next building, right? So then they created these regulations saying you need the light and air and all of that, and open space requirements and so on came. So these are all baked into our zoning regulations. So with every house, you get some open space, whether it's your backyard, whether it's your side yard, all your setbacks are designed to give each lot a certain amount of open space. And then you also have the overall open space for the city as a whole through our parks and through our, even the golf course, of course, on the west side of town is considered an open space just because it's an open area. So we do have some of those in our parks plan as well.
And is there any requirement at all to have any undeveloped, like trees as we were driving down Interstate 20 where, nope, you're not touching this?
You can have in the city if you designate it as such. So if you have land in the city, which is prime development land, and you say, sorry, it's only going to be trees, right? You have to use this in the capacity analysis, right? So it has to be encumbered by something in order for you to say, we're not going to consider it in capacity. So if it has wetlands, if it has things like that, we say, okay, these are not developable lands. We're not going to assign capacity to that. So we're not trying to convert every piece of property in the city into some sort of development. However, it's hard, unless it's a park or something like that, we cannot just take land and save it. It's-
Yes, Commissioner Morrow.
Thank you for taking my question or observation. Commissioner Fry, I just wanted to mention that there are substantial methods for mitigating air quality issues and view issues, but behind it all, of course, is the cost, and that's related to a financial and opportunity costs related to managing that. So I would say that with people who are in the high income bracket with regard to properties, that's more manageable because it can be paid for. But the lower tier homeowners, of which we were addressing, that's a tougher project. But it still can be mitigated, so we don't end up like New York where people are looking at another person's window at a building next door. But the truth be known is that when we bring more humans on the island, apart from just sequestering the island and just blocking it off and saying everybody's going to stay in Snohomish County or something to that effect, I don't see that, that we can prohibit people from coming. That's all I have.
Any other comments? Yes,
Kak, I apologize, one last question. Does the federal government, via the military, has a requirement for housing? I assume the median income, some of the military personnel are used in that survey for the median income?
Good question, I'm glad you brought that up. So, Navy housing, and I wish I'd display up the zoning map. So Navy housing is not considered in a capacity analysis.
Definitely not considering capacity, totally understand that.
They're
But are there
neither-
people?
Neither are their income or their, so what we do with the Navy is their land, the seaplane base, has no zoning in our zoning. So we have no regulations. So there's no capacity from our standpoint. We cannot use any of the Navy land for any capacity for
And so-
to come to the city. So they tell us how much housing they have and how much population, and that number stays the same. And they, unless they're bringing new squadrons or they have some new things, they'll tell us our population is going to go from 5 to 7,000 or something. They'll have a number. Currently, that number just stays the same for us over the planning period, and we have to accommodate the rest in the.
So we have, let's say, 10,000 people in the city, of which NAS Whidbey Island accounts for 5,000. So those are subtracted from us, so our population is then based off, and our numbers are based off the 5,000 that we have as current residents, not,
Yeah. So our total Oak Harbor's population is 24,000 and some, and that includes the seaplane base. The seaplane base's population is 5,000 some, so you take that out, and so the remaining portion is what needs to be accommodated in the city and so on.
all right. Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Andy. So we get to spend a couple nights together, Kak.
Yes.
And I'm not going to dive deep into numbers. In fact, maybe you and I can have a, off-bar discussion about some of these, but I'm just going to talk about a couple of them because ultimately I'm going to answer your question about options 1, 2, and 3, because that's what you came here for. At least from my perspective, and I thought this body would like to, at least hear my thoughts rather than have to watch the entire meeting tomorrow night. So, the little bit of history, and thanks for sharing, some of the history. We've been through kind of this discussion before with the county, and we've done buildable lands analysis studies. This is the third one that I can think of in the last 6 years, and we're using the county's planning policies, right? They give us some of these facts and figures, and I'm going to acquiesce to the numbers here, but I'm also going to point out that I think it's worse, right? And at the same time, understand that we have to come up with numbers that the county agrees with, because the county does have control over the land outside of our borders. And until we do show that we're taking the amount of capacity that we can take, we're going to have a hard time having that UGA discussion with them, which is where we've kind of landed in the past. Yeah. We are obligated. This is not a want of the city. This is a requirement of the city to take the capacity, and until such time as we've done our very, very, very best at fitting all the capacity required into the space we have, there is no more expansion. And quite frankly, that's because the county's job in the GMA is to prevent urban sprawl. I mean, that's the whole concept behind the UGA. Our job, obviously, is to provide services to the density, that's what it says in the GMA. County's job is to prevent that urban sprawl, right? And the way they do that is by, I don't want to say forcing us, but by certainly holding our hands to the fire in making sure that we're doing the best we can with capacity. With that said, few numbers in here I'm just going to point out that I think become fairly arbitrary, and you know, like the 0 to 90% sliding scale on, you know, vacant R1 land. You notice R1 shows we have a, you know, kind of an excess capacity there, and you know, and I'm going to say, you know, as a landowner who owns a piece of land that my house is on that could handle another 10 houses, it's not going to be sold by me or hopefully my family, because if they do, I'll kill them. You know, I think there's a lot of that, right? So that 0 to 90%, you got to agree, is a pretty big scale. And again, I'm going to acquiesce to these numbers. I'm just trying to point out that I think it's a little bit worse. And I'm also going to continue to be riding the commercial side of things, right? You know, what's a city if we don't have jobs? What's a city if we don't have commercial businesses to service the community, entertainment, all of that type of stuff? You know, to think the redevelopment factor is a 50% factor, I can see us edging that way, you know, with you know, option 2, which is where I'm going to be getting with this, the answer to your question. I can see us edging that way, especially with option 2, you know, looking at parking. You know, a perfect example is the redevelopment that took place over on Woodby Avenue. They removed 2 houses, built a dentist's office, right? But, you know, we have a parking lot that could service half of the neighborhood, right? Because that was the parking requirement, right? We sat down and looked at how many patients they could handle an hour, and if they were at full capacity, and the number of employees, and you know, then we had to have a certain factor there, and the next thing you know, we have a giant parking lot, right? Which, if that's how we're going to redevelop, we're going to have a hard time getting to this 50% redevelopment factor. Let's face it, redevelopment of commercial properties is an expensive thing to do, right? To buy a property that has a building on it, pay for that asset, tear that asset down, go through all of the environmental mitigations involved with Northwest Clean Air to tear that down, just to get to a bare piece of property, then to start to build, right? So it's one of the most expensive ways to build out commercial infrastructure. So, you know, as you know, and you know this well, and I'm going to continue to repeat it through this process, it's something us in the county really have to look at heavily. Again, this is a county number we're dealing with the 50% on redevelopment, and again, it's that county number that we're dealing with in the 0 to 90, and I know that in the past that number's been a bone of contention, and we're probably erring to the side in which we're trying to present the county a number that shows we're really trying to.
That's where the art comes in as opposed to the science, because we're trying to make a realistic prediction on what is actually possible for development, even if we give all, we've had ADU clauses, the best in the state, I would say, before other cities considered ADUs. Oak Harbor had ADUs. You could build a bigger ADU than you can build than your house. That's how flexible it was. How many ADUs do we get?
And remember the discussion about the flood coming
Yeah.
through the door when I was pushing for that, right? And we even talked about limiting the number of them because it was a concern. We were going to turn the whole city into a bunch of duplexes, right? You know, the other exception I do also make is, you know, C4, C5, vacant acres. You know, I think several of those vacant acres, in fact, I think the vast majority of that C5 is actually sitting in the ACUs and APZ. Which limits the number of people we can have per acre, so there's no way we could, you know, develop, 14 jobs per acre in those zones, because we couldn't even have 14 people per acre on the property.
Just to clarify, the C4 is mostly on the highway north of 16th. I think we have C5, like SARS is C5, right? I mean, so
Well,
we did talk about some
We're showing 10
potential
acres of vacant C5.
in C5, okay.
Yeah, and I think that the big hunk of that is actually next door to the U-Haul facility. I think that's a C5
Okay, we can look at
piece of property, and I
yeah.
think that's roughly 8 acres of that, which is in the ACUs, right? And then the industrial zone, we're showing 85 vacant acres. And again, I don't want to get too deep into these numbers, but I do want you to know I'm paying attention, right? Because there's a lot of work, a lot of effort went into this, and it deserves the amount of attention that we're giving it, and the amount of work and effort you've put into it is appreciated so much. The industrial zone, we show 85 vacant acres. The vast majority, that's wetlands, right? It's the large mass of Goldie Road, east side of Goldie Road, what's that, wetland, and then northeast 7th Avenue, I think, is still zoned in that zone. I mean, right? So a deeper dive, I'm just saying that I will acquiesce to these numbers, but at the same time, I want to recognize that these are probably best case scenario numbers. These are, in the past, let's face it, we've done an injustice to the county in the past, and we've presented some pretty worst case scenario numbers, right? And that's caused, some of this thing that we're going to work through this time, because the reality is they're in the same boat as we are, right? They have sufficient developable land in the county, just not in the right categories. They're gonna have the same exact issue. I don't envy your job at all, right? You have the exact same issue that we're having, right? That buildable lands analysis is gonna say there's enough land to handle these people, just not in the right places with the right income levels, right? So to get to your question, CAC, and thanks for putting up with all that, and I'll be more brief tomorrow night, so you don't have to listen to it twice. But to your questions, option one obviously is not an option, right? It's not an option to do nothing. Now, with that said, it's not that we're not doing anything, because we've done a lot in the last 2 years, right? 3,800 or 3,200 square foot minimum lot sizes, 4 stories in the CBD, right? I mean, there's adding of the ADUs and lifting the ADU requirement. We've done a lot. We just haven't seen a lot of results from that, and some of that means it takes time to cycle through. At the same time, I got to say, we have seen results of it, because, Mr. Gould, how many projects have we got in? I think there was 941, if I'm not mistaken, on this.
In the pipeline?
Yeah, in the pipeline on this document. That's a very impressive number, especially when you look back at the chart that shows how much of our housing has been built, since 2020. In the last 4 years, I think 0.4% of the housing in our city had been built in the last 4 years, where in the previous decades we were seeing, 15 to 17% being built in a decade when you're looking at housing age. So with that said, option one, doing nothing, we can't buy off on that as a city, to just close our eyes, close our minds, not look at what other communities are dealing with, the same things around us are dealing with, and tackle this. And I don't think the county would allow that either, quite frankly. I think you nailed it in your slide. Pretty hard sell to the county on any discussion of gaining additional UGA land specifically to try and fill this void, this lower AMI void. Option two, I think option two, quite frankly, will do a lot for the commercial sector. I think parking, stormwater, climate resiliency, I think comes into all that. Eddie, to your deal, making it so that less people are taking less trips to the store, and when they are, they're doing it economically. Do we need all these gigantic parking lots instead of trees, right? Do we need to be putting in underground storage tanks to handle runoff when, we could have a grassy swale with a couple of trees planted in it, But, when you're trying to, fit $10 in a 1 penny bag, right? I mean, that's what you have to do, right? And parking lot, because that's what code says we have to have. So I think parking lot, I think height, unfortunately, height really hasn't done anything for us yet, but I'm hopeful. We made the move, and obviously we have a first possible major development making use of the 4-story down in the CBD coming forward. I know we've done some clarifications on where we measure those heights from. We had some problems where, the lowest part of the property, where's that measurement from? And I know we've worked with developers to work through that. But certainly number two at a minimum. I will give you the input on number three. The concern I do have is with creating of the special districts, it almost seems as though we're going against our thoughts of our new building codes, right? I mean, we're going back to zones, right? We're going back to saying, okay, here's where that should go versus the new flexible building codes that we're looking at that basically say, hey, we don't care what you're building here as long as it looks like it fits. So, you know, we're on one hand, we're saying we're looking at going to this, but then on the other hand, we're going to, you know, refer back to, you know, these zones, right? And the other thing I have with that is I don't think that's a significant enough area, because my fear is when you create small pockets like that, the value of those properties will drive up significantly, right? Because of how limited they are, right? And density, as we know, does drive value. I mean, as a realtor, it's no secret. When you're selling multifamily, you do it based on the number of doors. You figure out how many doors that can be built there, and there's a multiplier to figure out what that property is worth based upon the potential use for it, right? And so value of those properties shoot up. How are we going to build affordable housing on property that's basically overvalued because we created the overvaluing by creating so little of it, right? So that's my concern there, where with the form-based code, right, if they could get that density anywhere in the city, it opens up the ability for quality redevelopment, buying a property that's undervalued because it's underutilized, because, you know, it quite frankly needs to be tore down, and then that density goes there versus forcing it into these pockets. So those are my thoughts.
Absolutely.
Thanks for putting up with me, and hopefully I answered a little bit of your question.
Oh, no, absolutely. Thanks for the feedback on the options. The option 3, it can be challenging. It's a tricky situation to try and get some properties to be rezoned. You're right. You're increasing the value of those properties by making a change that the property owner really didn't do anything about. It's a tool that the city is using, which creates density in these lots, which were otherwise not. Now, this can be viewed in 2 different ways. They can view it as a negative in terms of saying, city's planning something for my area that I'm not ready for or I don't want. That could be one of the reactions. Or the other reaction is, great, now my value is 3 times more, right, or 2 times more, however you want to call it. However, these areas identified, well, even though we change the zoning and we get capacity, we feel like they are not going to develop, just like how we change the ADU code or change regulation, it does not result in automatic capacity. There will be additional things that we may have to do in order to get some of these areas to the densities that we want. So in that way, it's good to also see this as a jumping off point for special areas, economic development. We haven't talked about it, but it's soon coming, the MFTE areas. So there are many more tools that we cannot currently accommodate with our capacity, but we do have in our arsenal going forward, planning into the next horizon. So we have to think, and these are future steps that we will come and share with you, but I'm just saying, option 3 has it has some options as well, planning wise, not from as you mentioned, maybe not an immediate tool to do anything, because these values will go up. Areas of interest for future planning efforts. All we have to do is identify them in the comp plan and maybe make some changes in the land use. When the actual development happens, you may have to do some additional pushing or facilitating in order for these to work, because we are pushing our envelope, as you said. We're doing our best. We're trying to accommodate as much as possible, and it's not easy. It's not like, oh, change the regulations and they will build it. We've done that for many years, and nobody has done anything. We still need to do some work in some of these areas, and that'll be future things that we will have to accommodate in the next 10 years, whether it's a special planning area, whether you want to accommodate MFTE. Some of these areas could be economic development areas. So you can develop special plans for each of these areas, and it may be necessary in order to achieve the density that you want to in these areas. So these are not, we are doing the minimum we can to get the capacity, but we also understand that there's additional things that the city may have to do to facilitate what we want to achieve in terms of capacity.
Yeah, and thanks for that, CAC. You know, and again, the concern I don't think is with the concept, I think it's with the amount of land and maybe even its locations, right? Because, you know, we're counting on, I think, was it 500 units in option 3 to, you know, to come off of that below 50% AMI category, right, with this move. And, you know, you of course, you look at number, was it 5 down there? I'm assuming that's the Oak Harbor Motors area. You know, let's face it, we could add as much density as we want there, but is that going to be affordable density, right? And so, I mean, this is coming off the report, right? They're saying if we add this, we're going to create 500 new affordable units, and I'm looking at this and saying, really? I don't know that that's what we're accomplishing. Certainly, we can accomplish 500 more units, but to say that those are going to be affordable units because we've created these areas, I don't think we're quite there, because I don't think we're offering up enough options in enough areas and in the right area to actually be targeting that AMI.
Point well taken. Again, like you said, we are doing our best to accommodate as best as we can. Some of the, yeah, and the back and forth, and that's why it's important. We try to do our best, and then we have to ask the county, or we need to help the county do what they can in the UGA, and it's going to start an interesting conversation about what's going to happen in the UGA, and that's going to be interesting as well. So, you know, point well taken. Yes, we can identify based on the tools that we have that R4 and CBD are the zones where we can create the 0 to 50. But these zones are existing in high-value areas, right? And so how do we make sure that we can get those affordability in those areas that we're creating is a challenge. And it'll need additional. It's not just about zoning them. They may need the MFDE, you know, incentive program as an overlay, or other types of incentives that in order to get the affordability that you're talking about. So the challenges, the more challenges out there for us to still handle. Yeah, good points.
Any other questions, comments? CAC, I have just a couple. So this plan is from 2020 to 2045. The houses that have been built from 2020 till now, have they been credited to that 5,530? Because the way the report reads, we're talking currently, we need to build these and we're short, but it doesn't quite specify if we've accounted for what's been built over the last 4 years.
Yeah, I think the planning period will be from 2025 to 2045, not 2020 to 2045. So we need to have 5,500 units from 2025 to 2045. And so all the units we build till 25, only if they come, I mean, we have a lot of development proposals that are sitting in the pipeline, which is the 900 units or so we're talking, and they are not in our, they're not developed yet, so we can only calculate them towards the future capacity. Whatever is built till today is not counting towards the 5,000 capacity. That's all new. So,
Thank you. Can we talk with the consultants then? Because throughout the report, they refer to this plan being 2020 to 2045. So, you know, that's 4 years of we're not getting credit for, right? If we're not, and if we're not supposed to, then that makes sense.
yeah, no, I will check that.
Couple other things that I concern me, and there's, I don't know how we get around these, right? The AMI for Island County is what's being used in the report, which comes out to 102,000 a year, but that's probably 25 to 30% higher than what Oak Harbor is, right? I think our median wage is somewhere around, or income is somewhere around 72 to 74,000, I believe. So I don't know if when we're doing the calculations for specifically to the city, if we have to get a little bit more granulated in order to get a better idea of kind of where we're going and what we need. It may not matter, but it seems like $30,000 to $40,000 would be a significant sway. You know, the mention earlier about military income, you know, if we do a localized number, we have to be very careful not to include housing allowance, right? Because that could skew, right? Civilians don't get housing allowances when they get their wages. Military service members do. But I also don't know if this is a case of, I know we're kind of hoping that in 45 years, or in 20 years, we'll have this achieved. I'd like to see a range where we're kind of normalizing these numbers maybe every 5 years or so, because it may make sense in 2045 that someone making $81,000 lives in a mobile home park. But as we try to convince people, residents today, if we try to convince our small business owners, our tradesmen, people who have dedicated, our city staff, people who have dedicated themselves to a profession, they're making the median wage for the community or higher, and we're telling them what you qualify for is a 2-bedroom mobile home on the outskirts of town, that's going to be really hard to get buy-in, right? I'm not saying everybody has to have a detached single family, but it's surprising to me that we're talking about growth when you have to have 120% of the median income on the island to even be considered as a detached single family being considered a housing type that you would qualify for or is affordable to you, right? And I know that that's not something the city can do, but as everything gets more expensive, wages will move up, but as we're planning this, and I don't know how to do this, but I'd like to see some type of layer of conversation that addresses the reality of life, right? And the fact that community members are not going to move here, start a business, right? An electrician, a plumber, somebody that we need here, skills-wise. I'm not saying we don't need other people. I'm saying people that bring those skills to the community that every community needs, they're not going to move here if we tell them, look, you'll make $80,000 a year, you qualify for a trailer, right? So I don't know how we have that conversation with the county, but to me, these numbers seem so far out of the realm of possibility for the people that are going to have to live under them, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I understand your concern. Good point that you bring up about the 102 being the AMI for Island County, probably the city's a little lower. We're kind of tied to the tool that the state has provided us, and so the county AMIs is what all the counties and all the cities are using. So in that way, at least the tool is used consistently, but it's a good point in terms of the AMI differences between the county and the city. So it's a starting point for a planning conversation. How does it imply practically? And your concerns are well taken in terms of what is the affordability now as opposed to what's the affordability 20 years from now. And a lot of things are hard to predict. It's natural to think everything will keep increasing, right? Land value will increase, housing costs will increase, inflation will go up, et cetera, et cetera. In some ways, I think what people are trying to do with solutions is to try not to make that trend continuous. So a way to try and reduce housing costs is to provide more housing and more options. So we're trying to, in a way, quelch that natural progression of just continuous rising prices so that 20 years from now, we don't end up with what you're saying. So technically, all the solutions we're trying to do in this region, and we're not doing it individually, right? An electrician, one who live here, is facing the same problem in Mount Vernon, is facing the same problem in Arlington, or wherever it is that they're going, because we're all dealing with the same issues. So the idea is by providing housing as a region and having housing options, that you'll temper this continuing rise of property values and affordability will even out with the supply of housing. At least that's the idea, And we have to go with that because that's all we have right now. I'm not saying that that's the solution. It's like when we looked at the transportation network, we thought going from 2 lanes to 4 lanes will take away the congestion issues. No, there were more cars that came. You can't make it into 6 lanes or 8 lanes. But that was That was the only solution that we had at that time. 2 lanes was not sufficient. We had no other solution other than to expand the capacity. So today we're doing that, the same thing. We're trying to expand the capacity, accommodate more people with the idea that housing costs will stabilize and people will become more affordable because there's more housing. Today, why are things affordable? Because there's no availability, right? And that's why everything is high. So trying to accommodate for this population and providing the housing, we're hoping that things will become more tempered and we're cutting that trend of higher land values and higher housing costs and making it more unaffordable. So in 20 years, I'm hoping that we don't have this issue, right? I'm hoping that we have enough housing or we have enough housing options and housing choices for different income groups in the community so that we're not telling somebody that for their income that they only can live in this situation, you know. So that's the idea. We're trying to provide the options. We're not trying to dictate where people should live or where should they go. Our idea of a solution is to provide as much and as variety of a housing, ADUs, duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, medium multifamily, high-density multifamily, so people can choose based on the income levels. They have many options. Right now, they don't. They either have maybe an apartment, or they have a single family, or maybe off-island, or in a tent, or in a car. They don't have that choice right now, and I think as a region and as a state, that's what we're trying to do, is to provide as much options so that in 20 years, we have more choices.
I appreciate that, Kak. I guess my overriding question that with these numbers is, can we have the consultants, or is there a way that we can look at projecting the capital value, right? Because $81,600 in 2045 might be minimum wage, I don't know. But if we don't project what the value of our capital in the future is going to be compared to what it is now, we may get to that end and say, hey, look, we achieved what we were trying to achieve because these houses are available to somebody that makes $81,600. But if that's 2025 wages, that's going to be 20 years out of date by the time we assess that. And I'm just wondering if there's value in projecting out what those wages would have to be every 5 years or every 10 years, or, you know, even if it's just a midway point and a final point. 81,600 today is 109,000 in 10 years, and it's 132,000 in 20 years. And then we have a normalized line to see if we actually hit our targets.
Yeah, we don't, I mean, we can do that exercise as a way to just find, but we're not required to do that, and I'm not sure what we would do with that information with the projection. So we can do that as a way to kind of like inform ourselves of what the income levels are, but I'm not sure if it can translate into anything in terms of capacity or what we share with the county. It's good information to have. I think it's good for us to be cognizant of the value increases and what we'll be planning for 20 years. But from a capacity standpoint, I'm not sure it'll help in any of the capacity. I hope that that comes across. But we could do that. We can kind of see what the projection of income levels will be, or what the AMI will be in 20 years, and whether our housing values will match up with what the projected value is what I think what you're trying to mention.
More so along the percentages of the AMI, right? Because each percentage of AMI
Will
dictates
increasing.
the availability of housing that should be affordable to that group, right? So we may not have anybody in the $30,000 range in 20 years, right? It may just not be there. I don't know. But that's what I was trying to see. If we build this model, do we build it in a way that we can refer back to it as time goes on? So, Commissioner Bradley, and then
Yeah, thank you. I understand this is the tool that we'll be given, so we have to use, it's what everybody in the county uses, right? But really, Oak Harbor's at a disadvantage because the people that live and work in Oak Harbor make less than the people in Cooper and the people in Limelight and Clinton. You know what I'm saying? Like, so as we look at this, and this is what I think you were trying to get at, certainly, when you look at these percentages and type of affordable housing, would it be worth looking at what the income level is of just the people that reside in Oak Harbor and trying to maybe, certainly we have to meet what the county lays out, but maybe have more of the lower income, you know what I mean, have our own kind of sliding scale, does that make sense? Our own AMI.
Pardon me?
Our own AMI. Yeah. People inside city limits.
Well, we can. If we were doing the capacity analysis ourselves and we were not dealing with any other jurisdiction, I would say that we can do a lot of these flexible tools. The fact that we're dealing with many jurisdictions and there are tools that have been given to us, we're just kind of using it because that's the conversation piece we can have with the county and the state. You know, there's a lot of things we have to talk to the city or the county and the state. What are the tools by which we can talk to them about is through these planning process. So if we create our own process of determining, if we wanted to go that route, we should have done it a long time ago, right? And created our own process and then told the county, we're going to do our own AMI, we're going to do our own calculation, we're going to do our own, you know. So, yeah, all these options are available, great points. But they're not understood tools for communication with other jurisdictions, and then we have to spend a lot of time justifying what we've come up with to them. So because of the time constraints we have, we try to use the tools for communication that we have right now. So that's kind of what the game is kind of restricted by that a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It was something that I was looking at, like when you say, hey, these are the tools that we're given. Like, it just seems kind of like us as Oak Harbor, we're at kind of a disadvantage using this one particular tool. That's all.
Understand.
Commissioner Wilson, did you have something, and then?
I was just
Commissioner
going to say
Morrow.
real quick in regards to your future dollars, based on the simple consumer price index and inflation going up, whether we keep it at current dollars right now, we're all going to be dealing with inflation, whether it's the paychecks or the way things go up in price. So it really won't affect anything. So just keeping it in today's dollars, because we don't know what inflation is going to take us to in 20 years, it's still going to average out to be, okay, yeah, in backwards dollars, yeah, $95,000 and 2045 is 80. So just working in today's dollars helps keep everybody on the same page.
It's the saying, you know, the rising tide floats all boats. That's kind of what it is. It's like as the prices go up, everybody's income and the AMI, everything is going to be relatively going up. So that's what we'll find out with any projections.
Commissioner Morrow.
I'm listening with regard to the city versus the county AMI, and my thought is that as we prepare a plan, that there's a certain unrealistic perspective by casting the numbers the way they are, and that we're being dictated to by other jurisdictions and we're ending up with a product that is unrealistic with regard to these matters of the AMI. So I would suggest that if there was some way to have an addendum or some other working feature to include the fact that we're not, we're on Whidbey Island, but we don't have the same numbers as the rest of the county. But that's a significant factor.
Definitely a valid point that you had, Ryan, even if we can talk to the county, CAC, about saying, hey, can we get, a number to say, okay, our residents on average make 72% of what the county's median is, then we can say, okay, based on that, here's what our numbers should be roughly.
Yeah, but I don't know if changing the AMIs is going to change the capacity. Just decreasing the AMI is not going to move the numbers back and forth. I hope that's the understanding. We're still planning for the same number of housing.
I don't think it'll change the capacity, you're exactly right, but it'll change the numbers to where the number won't be 0 to 33,000. it'll be actually 24,000 because you're in Oak Harbor. Just a rough throw out a number. You know what I'm saying? Because we have so many percentage of 0 to whatever income level, right? Which was the 900 that we had a deficit of. So that income level is going to change. I think it was 36 or 33,000 or whatever.
Let me bring up a table so I understand what, okay.
So, okay, yeah, so 30,600. It won't be 0 to 30,600 in Oak Harbor. It'll be 0 to 25,000 because the median income is not 102,000. We're actually, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it'll change that column, but it's not going to change
Totally
any of this
true.
column. This side.
Exactly.
But that doesn't do much for us in terms of capacity analysis that we're doing, right? I mean, again, this things that, again, art versus science, we're using existing tools, the 0 to 30 and all of that is what is being used statewide. Again, it's a communication piece. We can understand that our AMI is lower, but from a percentage and comparison standpoint, because everybody's using the same tool, we're kind of talking the same language. That's all it is.
Except I think the issue of how come we got so many needs to come up again. Because both Langley and Coopville have come way down. The county is not having to take near what we are, but we are a fixed area.
Yes, and good question. So traditionally, growth has been happening in the county. So if you look at the history, 60% of the growth has happened in the county. Only 20% has happened in the city. And this is the mantra for the last 20 years that the city and the county have been talking to each other, and the city has been saying this is not a good formula, that if we don't do anything, then we're going to go against the GMA, and development is going to continually happen in the county and not in the city, and that's against GMA. So with all of these changes, we're making more and more changes towards trying to be in concurrence with GMA and pushing more development into the city as opposed to the county. So when we did the methodologies in terms of the allocation, we actually thought about that. If we kept that the current trend, yes, 4,000 or 5,000 units would have gone to the county. Now, the state would have objected to that, number one. They'll say, they've already sent a memo, follow-up to all the cities saying, all your 0 to 50 AMI should be in a UGA. It can't be sitting out in the county on some lot in a mobile home park, right? They want all of these to go into the city's UGA. Now, Island County has gone against this guidance. This is not a law, this is a guidance. The Department of Commerce says, we want you to calculate like this. So they're giving us guidance, but Island County said, we want 1,900 of affordable units in the county. We're going to try and find a way, because they were talking about equality. They were like, every person in the low-income category should not be limited only to living in the city. The county felt like they should have a choice, that people should have a choice to live in the county if they want. The question is, we don't know how and where. It's a nice idea. It's a nice ideal to have, to give choices for people. But we don't know where and how the county is going to accommodate those 1,900 units. Now, Commerce has said guidance saying all of the 0 to 50 AMI should go in the UGA, but we still have some in the county. Now, the county has made a decision, knowing that Commerce wants all of the units in the UGA, they still allocated units to the county because they wanted that distribution. So, to your point, if we did nothing, things would go in the county. We are trying to bring a lot into the city. So in that way, we're accommodating. We're saying to the county, we're going to take as much as possible, and we're going to push our limits. We're going to push our brim. And that's what we're doing right now. We push to the brim with our tools. And we're saying we can't take the 5,000 units. Something has to be done with the 2,000 in the UGA, and then the conversation with the county starts. So,
Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, I just want to jump in one more time and remind everybody that, countywide policy, planning policies would set this. And in times past, we have tried to manipulate those or work around those and make adjustments. And the reality is, any adjustment we make to those policies is gonna have to be agreed to by the county before we make it, because otherwise, we're gonna be in the same place we were before. We're gonna take some numbers for a third time, and we're not gonna agree on the numbers, and then we're not gonna move past it. The reality is, like I said, I'm willing to acquiesce to these numbers, although I'm willing to say the outlook is worse than this, but I'm willing to acquiesce to these because I think these numbers speak strong enough to the need for the county and the city now to sit down, agree on some numbers, and then we can engage in conversations how we're gonna solve this, right? Which is kind of where we've gotten stuck before, right? We've gotten stuck at this whole number thing, and we don't agree with your analysis, and we don't agree with this, and et cetera, and we just never got past it. So now it's time, let's get past the numbers, and let's have some conversation. I'm excited about the September 10th meeting. I felt as though the last meeting that we had jointly with the county commissioners and the city, which was a long time coming, that we all left there with a little bit better understanding of each of our challenges, and that, to me, was progress.
Absolutely. And I just want to say, in the past, this was always a sticking point in every update, as Commissioner Wiesner, and we're not past that point yet. Just saying, we're getting to that sticky point where we're sharing this information. So till we get past the county saying, okay, we accept your land capacity analysis as you've done it, it's as per methodology, and okay, this the 2,000 or so units that we have to deal with, let's work with that. If they say that, that would be the biggest step in 20 years that the OCABR has made in any of these calculations. So we're still not, we're just beginning, and you can see the concerns as a commissioners. You have concerns as council members. You have concerns, and as commissioners, you have concerns. So this is not the end, right? This is just the beginning. We're just getting to the sticky situation, and I'm not entirely sure that even with these type of calculations we've done, that we can get past or have the county accept these numbers as presented. So that's what the joint meeting is about, and that's what we're trying to share this information so you have a better understanding, so that the city council has a better understanding, and then when they meet with the commissioners, they can actually have a conversation and note the challenges and how can we move forward. So we're still a long ways from there. So, but our intent is to try and move this forward as best as we can. We're bringing this early in the process so that this discussion can start, conversation with the county can be had. There's going to be back and forths. There's going to be, the only way some of this is going to work is through interlocal agreement. And so those are things that will come forward later on in the process. So we have a lot of work ahead of us. This is just the first step. And it's going to take us 2 to 3 months just to get past these numbers, or even longer. Realistically, that would be a short time if we can get to the end of the year. It took more than that. So anyway, this is our best effort as of today since the adoption of our comp plan in terms of our capacity. So the consultants have done a fabulous job of following the process, using the steps. And we're sharing this information so that we can share it with the county as well. And we'll see what they have to say about it. And that's when the conversation will start in terms of where things go and how things will happen.
Thank you, Kag. Any other question? Yes, Vice Chair Inglewood.
Okay, so I think my biggest concern, and I'll start by saying I think option 3 for me makes the most sense because I think that all we can do is important, right? Regardless of that work being done, I think taking those steps is what we need to be doing in the grand scheme of things. These aren't just numbers, right? It's a math problem, but the intent is that we are driving affordability, that we are having, people living here that can afford to live here, right? And so the term that comes to mind right now, and this is outside of land capacity analysis, is market failure, right? Like, this has been housing costs, and that unaffordability that we see here has been a market failure 80 years in the making, right? Since World War II. We can get into that if you really want to know that history. But 30% of $100,000 as median income winds up being $800 a month for rent, right? That's, so 30% of 30,600 divided by 12, $800, a little bit less. That isn't achievable in hardly any context, I don't think. I think that's the biggest concern, that like when we talk about, we have multifamily tax exemption projects, we have, these are the zones that multifamily and lower affordable housing can exist. Whether that actually meets that goal of making affordable housing, I think is a big if, right? And so that, to me, means what more can we do outside of zoning, outside of setbacks, outside of all of these development regulations? How does the city invest in ensuring that that exists in an affordable way, right? Whether that is, projects or partnerships or however, I think that needs to be part of this conversation as a whole, is that we can say that, we have a capacity of 67 and there's a deficit of 1,000 or of 1,100, but over 20 years, if we are just saying that we are achieving that through development regulations and we've met the intent of the Growth Management Act, that still doesn't, in my mind, do enough to ensure that that actually is happening on the ground, right? So I think that something that the City Council and Planning Commission should look forward to as part of this comp plan overall is, how do we direct investment? How do we plan and develop programs or partnerships to achieve those goals, right? And I know that that's outside of our toolbox right now, but I think that that's an important conversation to have.
Absolutely, 100% agree. It's hard to think through all of that. It's not necessary, I should say, that we need to develop all of that with the comp plan process. We can do that as a future planning process, but we can identify these areas as potential targets for development, and then you can develop plans, as mentioned, to make sure that the city is directing resources or some sort of a, partnership or whatever it is still needed to bring some of these ideas to fruition. So definitely point taken. We will need some future planning efforts to continue to do that.
One more sort of clarifying thing for me. So the process of having an urban growth area outside of unincorporated, or having the unincorporated urban growth area, is the intent eventually, right, that those developed areas outside of city limits become part of the city? And right, so like, it seems like it would be appropriate for the areas that are already developed in the county right now to become Oak Harbor proper, right? And that, I think, makes a lot of sense when we're thinking about if Island County has, whatever partnership with us in the urban growth areas to ensure that development is relatively dense, that by the time that it becomes annexed into the city, it has redevelopment potential, or it is, more appropriate or able to be capitalized on in terms of higher density. I guess I'm confused a little bit about if we're talking about the urban growth area outside of the city, is that intended to stay urban but unincorporated forever, or does it eventually expect to come into the city?
Yeah, I think the expectation is all of the areas in the UGA will eventually be in the city. Having said that, there are big challenges in our existing UGA for the city, because the original UGA was not drawn with 101 criterias in place. It was just drawn as a starting point, and that line put in a lot of properties, developed properties, and I think with the idea that somehow these properties are urban developments and they will come into the city and they will become part of the urban fabric. And that's why all of these developed lots were included in the UGA. They may have been developing at the time when some of these when the UGA was done, So it's a good question. The county and this, I mean, from the city standpoint, we expect all of these to come to the city at some point. How it happens is a matter of question. Now, if you ask the city would like to have these properties come in as one big chunk, because they either have a common water district, they either have some sort of a service that they're all partnering on, and it's mainly water. And the only way to bring benefit to them and to the city is to get them in as a whole. So you have to unfortunately wait for the infrastructure to be primed, to be changed, so that everybody will buy in, or some other circumstances by which they would want to come in. If we respect the annexation policies we have right now, it's mainly property owner driven. So the city is not going and grabbing areas for annexation into the city. We're having property owners come to the city and saying, I want to be in the city, I want to develop in city standards, and therefore you come in, and then we take you in as a city. Now with these new tools and this new approach that we have with having all of this density in the UGA that we have to plan for, and ultimately we want it to be in the city, we have to look at new tools in order to determine how we bring land into the city, make sure that this land develops in the city. And that's part of what we need to talk to the county. There is legislation and there are tools that we can enter into an agreement with the county to bring in large areas. So it doesn't depend on the property owner anymore, so it depends on the jurisdiction. So we go to the island county and say, we want to bring this entire subdivision that's in the water district into the city as a whole, and you do it through an agreement, and they come into the city. And I see those mechanisms as a way to bring these properties in. Waiting for property to come in one by one will take years. If they do come in big chunks, there are opportunities. Let's say in the next capacity analysis, they'll be included in the city's capacity. So all of a sudden now we have all these county lots that will be in the city's capacity analysis. These lots are probably bigger than what we have in our city. These lots are probably greater than 7,000 square feet. They can accommodate more units. So when they come into the city as a whole, then they'll start to add to our city's density, and you can see that gaining more of an urban form. So this I can see happen in the long term, not in the short term. But that's how I envision these areas coming into the city and developing.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you, CAC, for your presentation and for answering all of our questions this evening.
You're welcome.
At this time, we'll move on to our next item, which is our joint workshop topic, and that will be presented by Mr. David Kuhl and Mr. Kat Kamek.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. This particular topic follows on what we just talked about just now. We would like you to be prepared for the meeting that we're going to hold as a joint workshop with the City Council. Now, that joint workshop will be held on the 25th at the council's regular workshop day. Your next meeting is on the 24th of September. So on the 24th, we will also cover more of this comp plan discussion and ask and answer any questions at that time. But what we thought we would do is get your list of questions that you would like to bring up with the City Council so that you can present those in an orderly fashion and have it stay organized. And I think everybody appreciates a sense of organization when it comes to back and forth between Planning Commission and City Council. So CAC and I thought maybe if we could get a list of your particular questions you would like to propose to the council, that would be helpful. Now, the other aspect of this meeting is Commissioner Gore asked for a chance, and she's right, to voice your opinions and what you think. And so we want you to take the first part of that meeting and have the chance to give us your thoughts. Tell us what you think about comprehensive planning in the city. And so that's why we wanted to get a list together before we get too far. So I've been typing down a lot of your questions and a lot of responses to that. And I don't know, CAC, perhaps we can discuss this further on the meeting at the 24th, if they can just be thinking about it between now and then.
Absolutely. I think we wanted to just raise we don't want to go into it cold. We have 1 hour of the workshop where the planning commission can talk to the city council. We want you to talk to them about matters that are concerning you, but if there's any information that we as staff can provide to help you have that discussion with city council, if you let us know now, we can try and prepare that and provide it to you at your next meeting, or somehow get you that information so that you're better prepared to talk to the city council on the issues that you want. If there are no information that you need from us, that's fine. You still have an hour with the city council. You can talk about whatever it is you want. But we thought we'll just provide an opportunity. If there's anything that we can provide as tools to help you have that conversation, we can provide that to you at the meeting so that you, before the next meeting, so you have that information. So just wanted to kind of plan for it, and if there are topics or if there are questions that you have interest in, we can either list them. Again, it's supposed to be informal. I think it was, anytime we've had these joint workshop meetings, it's usually loaded with staff presentations, and a lot of the discussions usually very topic oriented. So Planning Commission doesn't get a chance to freely talk about other topics they wish to talk. And so this 1 hour, I think, gives you the opportunity to kind of bring anything up that the Planning Commission thinks is you're interested in talking to the council, or you'd like to have your views, or you want to know what they're thinking so that you can do your job better here as a commissioner, making recommendations. Whatever it is, it's a chance for you to talk to them. And this is just, we wanted to make sure that we can, if there's information we can provide to you, we can provide that, and then you can arm yourself with that in your conversations with them. So that's kind of the talking points we wanted to just bring up.
Any questions or comments from the commission? Yes, Vice Chair.
Do you, as staff, have a timeline for when you would like us to have questions to you so you have enough time to do research?
Sure. What we can, I can ask the question in reverse. How much in advance would you like to have the information to talk to the city council, or what type of information would you kind of like to have? If you have it 1 week before, if you like to have it with your planning commission packet, then I would say we'd like to have it at least 10 days before the planning commission meeting, or at least 2 weeks before, so we can get the information together. So 24th is let's say before September 10th. Is that a good time? I'm just pulling that out of the air, but let's see what day is it.
That's a Tuesday.
September 10th is a Tuesday. Is that good? Okay. Yeah, just feel free to email me or David or Sarah on any questions or reports or things that you'd like to see, and we'll try, if it's existing documents that we can find and forward you, we can do that. If you want to talk to any of us, either through a phone conversation, or you want to stop at our office and talk to us about any topic, we'll be happy to do that as well.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? All right, well, thank you for that. We will move on to members' comments. Is there any member of the commission that has any comments this evening? Okay, well, then I will give my comments, and so I'll start right at the end point here. Tonight will be my last meeting. I have tendered my resignation to the mayor, and that will be effective September 1st. I want to say that the last couple years, I really appreciate the support of everybody. And you look around the room today, and this commission is full, and that wasn't the case a few years ago when I joined it. And I can remember a couple meetings where there were 2 or 3 of us here. And, this commission, I believe, through all your efforts, through the commissioners, through Sarah, through Dave, CAC, everybody that makes this go. I might be a little bit biased, but I believe that this commission is the example that all the city's advisory commissions should be following and should strive to be like. And that's again because of all the work that you guys do, and I appreciate each and every one of you for that. My reason for resigning, I've shared that with a few people. I'm not going to share it publicly. I don't know that it needs to be publicly put out there for fodder. So I'll say it's time. There's some things that I need to do, and there are some changes that I don't know that I'm ready to make at this point in time. So it's time for me to go. Vice Chair Engelbrecht has my full endorsement with your experience in planning. You've done a great job as the vice chair, and you have my full endorsement when the vote comes for a new chair. And so, again, thank you to each and every one of you. All right, if there are no other comments or questions? I'm sorry? Oh, yes, Commissioner Fry.
I just wanted to say thank you for everything that you've done on the Planning Commission, and I really appreciate the conversations with you, helping get me on board and teaching me a few things, and I just wanted to say thank you on probably behalf of the board, and I wish you well, and if you ever want to come back, by all means, you're more than welcome, by me anyhow.
Thank you, I appreciate that, really do. Councilmember Wiesner.
Thank you, Andy. Yeah, and I too just wanted to echo that, although I don't know why he'd want to come back. It's a thankless job, right? And you certainly have done wonders over the last 2 years. And I can remember a time when, we didn't have a strong set of people up here, and we didn't have a strong leader, and we struggled, right? There's a lot of heavy lifting that's done by this committee in particular, and I would agree absolutely with your statement that this group of individuals in this commission is certainly exemplifies, I think, how the rest of the commissions in the city should be ran. And we appreciate everything you've done, Andy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. All right, if there is no other questions or comments this evening, we will move on. Our next scheduled meeting is set for September 24th, 2004. With that, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
A motion, we adjourn.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor? All right.